Hey guys, it's Cass. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about 15 books that are releasing in the second half of 2024 that I'm looking forward to reading. I'm not always the most up to date on new releases, but I'm trying to be better about it and at least be in the loop about what is coming out. But if there's anything that I missed on this list that you are really excited about, let me know in the comments. And if you enjoy literary fiction, essay collections, memoirs, maybe consider subscribing because that is mainly what we talk about here. And yeah, I just love to be able to discuss books with you guys. So yeah, we're gonna get right into it. The first book that I wanted to talk about is Soldier Sailor by Claire Kilroy. This is releasing on June 4th from Simon & Schuster. This is one that I have a digital galley of on NetGalley, so I actually did just pick this up and start reading it yesterday, and I'm really enjoying it so far, but let me read you the blurb. Claire Kilroy takes readers deep inside the early days of motherhood, exploring the clash of fierce love with a seismic shift in identity. Kilroy conjures the raw, tumultuous emotions of a new mother as her marriage strains and she struggles with questions of equality, autonomy, and creativity. Soldier Sailor is a tale of boundless love and relentless battle, a bedtime story to a son, Sailor, recounting their early years together. Spending her days in baby groups, playgrounds, and supermarkets, Soldier doesn't know who she is anymore. She hardly sees her husband, who is taken to working late most nights. A chance encounter with a former colleague feels like a lifeline to the person she used to be but can hardly remember. Tender and harrowing, Kilroy's modern masterpiece portrays parenthood in all its agony and ardent joy. So yeah, if you spent any time on my channel, you'll know that I love books about motherhood, so this one sounds really appealing to me, and it is a whirlwind so far. I think I'm a quarter of the way through. It's really fast-paced, and I think that it's a pretty short book as well, so yeah, I'm really enjoying it. More to come on this in my May wrap-up. I don't know why I just want to turn the camera off. The next book that I want to talk about is Any Person is the Only Self by Elisa Gabbert. This is releasing on June 11th from FSG. I also have a digital galley of this on NetGalley, and I read it last month, so if you want my full thoughts, I've actually talked about this already in a couple different videos. I've talked about it in my April wrap-up and in my 20 essay collections recommendations video. The blurb for this one says, contagiously curious essays on reading, art, and the life of the mind from the acclaimed author of The Unreality of Memory. Who are we when we read, when we journal? Are we more ourselves alone or with friends, right now or in memory? How does time transform us in the art we love? In 16 dazzling, expansive essays, the acclaimed essayist and poet Elisa Gabbert explores a life lived alongside books of all kinds, dog-eared and destroyed, cherished and discarded, classic and cliched, familiar and profoundly new. She turns her witty, searching mind to the writers she admires, from Plath to Proust, and the themes that bind them: chance, freedom, envy, ambition, nostalgia, and happiness. She takes us to the strange edges of art and culture, from hair metal to surf movies to party fiction. Any Person is the Only Self is a love letter to literature and to life, inviting us to think alongside one of our most thrilling and versatile critics. So yes, this one was an enjoyable one. It wasn't a new favorite of all time for me, but I do think that it's a solid essay collection for any book lovers out there. Next, we have Parade from my girl Rachel Cusk. This is releasing on June 18th from FSG. This is another one that I have on NetGalley and will be picking up in this month, I think. I do want to do a whole Rachel Cusk video. I don't know what exactly the format's gonna be, but I do want to do something about her for the release of this book. So if you have anything that you are wanting to see, let me know. I'm thinking maybe a ranking of her books that I've read or something like that. But this is one that I am maybe the most excited for on this list. The blurb says, from Rachel Cusk, author of the Outline trilogy, comes this startling, exhilarating novel that once again expands the notion of what fiction can be and do. Midway through his life, the artist G begins to paint upside down. Eventually, he paints his wife upside down. He also makes her ugly. The paintings are a great success. In Paris, a woman is attacked by a stranger in the street. Her attacker flees, but not before turning around to contemplate her victim, like an artist stepping back from a canvas. At the age of 22, the painter G leaves home for a new life in another country, far from the disapproval of her parents. Her paintings attract the disapproval of the man she later marries. When a mother dies, her children confront her legacy. The stories she told, the roles she assigned to them, the ways she withheld her love. Her death is a kind of freedom. Parade is a novel that demolishes the conventions of storytelling. It surges past the limits of identity, character, and plot to tell the story of G, an artist whose life contains many lives. Rachel Cusk is a writer and a visionary like no other, who turns language upside down to show us our world as it really is. I actually don't think that I had read the full description of this book until right now. So I am perplexed by this, intrigued. It's kind of reminding me of what I can remember from like the blurb of How to Be Both by Ali Smith, which I haven't read yet, but interesting, like art related, like many lives within one life. I've seen some people say that this felt maybe a bit too big brain for them, so that has me a bit nervous, but ultimately I'm very excited to get to this one. I'm gonna try not to say that I'm very excited for all of these. The next book is The Last Sane Woman by Hannah Regel. This is coming out on July 2nd from Verso, and I have this on NetGalley as well, so I will be getting to it at some point. I believe this is, yes, it's a debut novel, so I haven't really heard anything about this author before, but I saw it on NetGalley and I thought that the cover and the title were really intriguing. I don't remember what it's about, so let's find out together, I guess. A beguiling debut novel about friendship and failure. Nicola Long is a few years out of a fine arts degree, listless and unenthusiastically employed in London. She begins to spend her hours at a small, underfunded archive dedicated to women's art. There she discovers one side of a correspondence beginning in 1976 and spanning a dozen years, written from one woman, a ceramics graduate, uncannily like Nicola, to a friend living a contrasting and conventionally moored life. As Nicola reads on, an acute sense of affinity turns into obsession. She abandons one job after another to make time for the archive. The litany of coincidences in the letters becomes uncanny, and Nicola's feeling of ownership begets a growing dread. Should she be afraid of where these letters are leading? Okay, this is making me even more excited for this one as well. It's kind of giving me the same vibes as My Death by Lisa Tuttle, which I just finished. I haven't talked about that on here at all yet, but that was a 5-star read for me, and it had kind of the same like obsession with an artist vibe and this kind of like creepy, like impending doom dread feeling to it. So I might have to bump this up on the priority list because this blurb has me even more sold than I was already. Next, we have The Coin by Yasmin Zaher. This is publishing on July 9th from Catapult. I think that this might be a debut as well. I haven't heard of this author before, and this is not one that I have on NetGalley, so I'll have to keep an eye out for it whenever it comes out. The blurb for this says, a bold and unabashed novel about a young Palestinian woman's unraveling as she teaches at a New York City middle school, gets caught up in a scheme reselling Birkin bags, and strives to gain control over her body and mind. The Coin's narrator is a wealthy Palestinian woman with impeccable style and meticulous hygiene, and yet the ideal self, the ideal life, remains just out of reach. Her inheritance is inaccessible, her homeland exists only in her memory, and her attempt to thrive in America seems doomed from the start. In New York, she strives to put down roots. She teaches at a school for underprivileged boys where her eccentric methods cross boundaries. She befriends a homeless swindler, and the two participate in an intercontinental scheme reselling Birkin bags. But America is stifling her willfulness, her sexuality, her principles. In an attempt to regain control, she becomes preoccupied with purity, cleanliness, and self-image, all while drawing her students into her obsessions. In an unforgettable denouement, Her childhood memories converge with her material and existential statelessness, and the narrator unravels spectacularly. In enthralling sensory prose, the coin explores nature and civilization, beauty and justice, class and belonging, all while resisting easy moralizing. Provocative, wry, and inviting, the coin marks the arrival of a major new literary voice. So yes, I think that this is in fact a debut. You guys like how I'm also just kind of finding out what these books are about as well. Yeah, excited to pick up more Palestinian literature, and this one sounds like simultaneously a romp, but also like it's going to be dealing with some pretty serious topics. So I'm curious to see how she kind of balances that in this book. Like the Birkin bags thing is so kind of funny to me. But I think that the questions that it's exploring are going to be very much in the wheelhouse of what I like reading about. Next is The Anthropologists by aysegul savas. This is coming out on July 9th from Bloomsbury. I'm really interested in reading some of Savas's work. I have Walking on the Ceiling checked out from the library currently, but I haven't gotten to it yet. So we'll see if I can get to it before I have to return it to the library. The blurb for this one says, Asya and Manu are looking at apartments, envisioning their future in a foreign city. What should their life here look like? What rituals will structure their days? Whom can they consider family? As the young couple dreams about the possibilities of each new listing, Asya, a documentarian, gathers footage from the neighborhood like an anthropologist observing local customs. Forget about daily life, chides her grandmother on the phone. We named you for a whole continent and you're filming a park. Back in their home countries, parents age, grandparents get sick, nieces and nephews grow up, all just slightly out of reach. But Asya and Manu's new world is growing too, they hope. As they open the horizons of their lives, what and whom will they hold on to, and what will they need to release? Unfolding over a series of apartment viewings, late night conversations, last rounds of drinks, and lazy breakfasts, The Anthropologist is a soulful examination of home building and modern love, written with aysegul savas's distinctive elegance, warmth, and humor. This one sounds delightful, kind of like maybe more of a slice of life kind of thing. I really love the idea of the main character being like a documentarian. That description almost reminds me of Whereabouts by Jhumpa Lahiri, just in the way that I feel like that novel was like a collection of just like observations about everyday life. So I'm curious to see if this is in kind of a similar vein to that. Next, we have The Long Run, a creative inquiry by Stacey d'Erasmo. This is coming out on July 9th from Grey Wolf Press, and this is an essay collection, so love that. The blurb for this says, how do we keep doing this? Making art. Stacey d'Erasmo has been writing for 20 years and had published 3 novels when she asked herself this question. She was past the rush of her first books and wondering what to expect, how to stay alive in her vocation in the decades ahead. D'Erasmo began to interview older artists she admired to find out how they'd done it. She talked to Valda Setterfield about her 60-year career that took her from the Merce Cunningham Dance Company to theatrical collaborations with her husband to roles in films. She talked to Samuel R. Delany about his vast oeuvre of books in many genres. She talked to Amy Sillman about working between painting and other media and between abstraction and figuration. She talked to landscape architect Daryl Morrison, composer Tanya Leon, actress Blair Brown, musician Steve Earle, and visual artist Cecilia Vicuña. She saw connections between them into artists across time, Colette, David Bowie, Ruth Asawa. She found insights too about what has driven and thwarted and shaped her as a writer. Instead of easy answers or a roadmap, The Long Run offers one practitioner's conversations, anecdotes, confidences, and observations about sustaining a creative life. Along the way, it radically redefines artistic success, shifting the focus from novelty, output, and external recognition towards freedom, fluidity, resistance, community, resilience, and longevity. I feel like I haven't really seen anything similar to this as far as like how expansive it is and how many different art forms that this touches on. I love the way that she talked to so many different types of creatives, and kind of that question of like getting older and sustaining your career in art reminds me a little bit of Daybook by Anne Truitt, which was more of like a journal thing than essays, but I think that this might be touching on some of the same themes. I feel like we don't get that like older perspective often in this kind of genre of books. I feel like a lot of the times it's younger people grappling with success and figuring out like how to make a living. So I am very curious to get Stacey's point of view on creativity and art. Next we have Bal Nightmare by Halle Butler. This is publishing from Random House on July 16th. I read Butler's previous novel, The New Me, at the beginning of 2023, and I thought that it was hilarious. It really worked for me. I know a lot of the Goodreads reviews were not as glowing as mine was, but I thought that it was absolutely hilarious. So I'm excited to see what she does here. The blurb says, Margaret Ann Maudie Yance had just returned to her native land in the Midwestern town of X to mingle with the friends of her youth, to get back in touch with her roots, and to recover from a stressful decade of living in the city in a small apartment with a man she now believed to be a megalomaniac or perhaps a covert narcissist. So begins Halle Butler's sadistically precise and hilarious Bal Nightmare, which follows Maudie as she abruptly ends her long-term relationship and moves back to her hometown, throwing herself at the mercy of her old friends as they, all suddenly tipping toward middle age, go to parties, size each other up, obsess over past slights, dream of wild triumphs, and indulge in elaborate revenge fantasies. When her friend Pam invites a mysterious East Coast artist to take up a winter residency at the local university, Maudie has no choice but to confront the demons of her past and grapple with the reality of what her life has become. As the day of reckoning approaches, friends will become enemies, enemies will become mortal enemies, and old loyalties will be tested to the extreme. Bal Nightmare is filled with complicated characters who will dazzle you in their rendering just as often as they will infuriate you with their decisions. Halle Butler singularly captures the volatile, angry, aggrieved, surreal, and entirely disorienting atmosphere of the modern era. Sounds like this is going to be a bit more cast of characters than The New Me was. I'm glad to see that this one is also described as hilarious, because that was really the strong suit for me in her previous work, but this sounds like it's going to be another kind of like depressed woman moving vibe, which I can always get down with. So yeah. Then we have Liars by Sarah Manguso. This is releasing on July 23rd from Hogarth, and I have already read this book, and I want to say that I loved it, but loved feels like too generic of a word, because I think my feelings around it were actually pretty complicated. This book, I feel like I had such like a versatile reaction, not a versatile, visceral. I feel like I had such a visceral reaction to the situations and emotions that Sarah Manguso is talking about in this novel, and I get more into it in my, I believe it was my January wrap up. There's just like a lot of intensity in this, which I really loved, but I felt like it was genuinely like affecting my mood just like in my day-to-day life while I was reading it, if that makes sense. So she's a very powerful writer, and I really enjoyed one of her previous books, Ongoingness, The End of a Diary, which was more like essayistic. And I also read her other novel, Very Cold People. So she's definitely someone that's on my radar. I think that this was honestly probably her strongest work that I've read so far. So can't wait to see what else she does in her career. This also has a blurb from Elif Batuman, painful and brilliant. I loved it. So true. The blurb for this one says, a searing novel about being a wife, a mother, and an artist, and how marriage makes liars of us all, from the author of Very Cold People and 300 Arguments. A nuclear family can destroy a woman artist. I'd always known that, but I'd never suspected how easily I'd fall into one anyway. When Jane, an aspiring writer, meets filmmaker John Bridges, they both want the same things: to be in love, to live a successful, creative life, and to be happy. When they marry, Jane believes she has found everything she was looking for, including, a few years later, all the attendant joys and labors of motherhood. But it's not long until Jane finds herself subsumed by John's ambitions, whims, and ego. In short, she becomes a wife. As Jane's career flourishes, their marriage starts to falter. Throughout the upheavals of family life, Jane tries to hold it all together, that is, until John leaves her. Liars is a tour de force of wit and rage, telling the blistering story of a marriage as it burns to the ground and of a woman rising inexorably from its ashes. I feel like blistering is a really good word to describe this. I could just like feel the things that the narrator is feeling so intensely, even though it's not an experience that I've had. I don't know, the writing in this was just super powerful, and I would definitely recommend checking this one out because I can speak to how good it is. Next we have Catalina by Karla, Cornejo, Villavicencio. This is coming out from One World, which I believe is an imprint of Penguin Random House, and this is also releasing on July 23rd, which also happens to be my birthday, so happy birthday to me. Catalina came on my radar because of Kat's Field Notes. I remember her posting some quotes from it to her Instagram story, and I think that she talked about it in a video as well, and I believe that she enjoyed it, so that was how I came across this. The blurb says, "A year in the life of the unforgettable Catalina Iturralde, a wickedly wry and heartbreakingly vulnerable student at an elite college, forced to navigate an opaque past, an uncertain future, tragedies on 2 continents, and the tantalizing possibilities of love and freedom. When Catalina is admitted to Harvard, it feels like the fulfillment of destiny. A miracle child escapes death in Latin America, moves to Queens to be raised by her undocumented grandparents, and becomes one of the chosen. But nothing is simple for Catalina, least of all her own complicated, contradictory, ruthlessly probing mind. Now a senior, she faces graduation to a world that has no place for the undocumented. Her sense of doom intensifies her curiosities and desires." There's a dog barking. She infiltrates the school's elite subcultures, internships and literary journals, posh parties, and secret societies, which she observes with the eye of an anthropologist with an interloper's skepticism. She is both fascinated and repulsed. Craving a great romance, Catalina finds herself drawn to a fellow student, an actual budding anthropologist eager to teach her about the Latin American world she was born into but never knew, even as her life back in Queens begins to unravel. And every day the clock ticks closer to the abyss of life after graduation. Can she save her family? Can she save herself? What does it mean to be saved? Brash and daring, part campus novel, part hagiography, part pop song, Catalina is unlike any coming-of-age novel you've ever read. And Catalina, bright and tragic, circled by a nimbus of chaotic energy, driven by a wild heart, is a character you will never forget. Interesting that this one also deals with like this anthropological theme. I'm curious to see what the writing style of this is like, since it is like a coming of age, like college story. I think that the quotes that Kat posted from it seemed really funny and like really well written, so I'm just hoping that the writing doesn't skew like younger, if you know what I mean. Yeah, this seems like it's going to talk a lot about like identity and culture, and it sounds delightful. Next, we have Mammoth by Eva Baltasar, translated by Julia Sanchez from the Catalan. This is releasing on August 6th from And Other Stories. I have not read any of her books yet. She's been on my radar for a while now, and I've come across some of her other books at the store, but I just haven't picked them up yet for some reason. I think that they might be on Scribd, so maybe I'll pick one of those up digitally before this releases. Let me know if you've read Eva Baltasar before. I know she's been kind of like a booktube darling, but I'm not sure which of her other books to start with. So the blurb for this one says, Mammoth's protagonist is a disenchanted young lesbian. She's inexperienced, irritated by life, eager to gestate, and determined to strip everything else down to essentials. She seduces men at random, swaps her urban habitat for an isolated farmhouse, befriends a shepherd, nurses lambs, battles stray cats, waits tables, cleans house, and dabbles in sex work. All in pursuit of life in the raw. This small bomb of a novel, not remotely pastoral, builds to a howling crescendo of social despair, leaving us at the mercy of Eva Baltasar's wild voice. very interesting. I feel like a lot of her work deals with like sexuality and, just from what I've seen, like kind of this idea of living the life that is like right for you, and I feel like this definitely fits into that vein. Sounds like it's gonna be kind of wild. So yeah, I'm curious on what the consensus is gonna be about this one. I feel like it might be polarizing. I don't know. Next we have Opacities on Writing and the Writing Life by Sofia Samatar. This is releasing on August 13th from Soft Skull Press. From the title alone, I'm very intrigued by this. Some of my favorite writing has to do with writing, so I feel like this is gonna be right up my alley. Haven't read any of Sofia Samatar's other work, so yeah, this will be kind of my first entry into it. The blurb says Opacities is a book about writing, publishing, and friendship. Rooted in an epistolary relationship between Sofia Samatar and a friend and fellow writer, this collection of meditations traces Samatar's attempt to rediscover the intimacy of writing. I haven't read too many epistolary books of like people writing letters to each other, so curious how that structure is going to work for me. But in a series of compressed, dynamic prose pieces, Samatar blends letters from her friend with notes on literature, turning to Edouard Glissant to study the necessary opacity of identity, to Teresa Hatkyuncha for a model of literary kinship, and to a variety of others, including Clarice Lispector, love, I'm in, Maurice Blanchot, and Rainer Maria Rilke for insights on the experience and practice of writing. In doing so, Samatar addresses a number of questions about the writing life. Why does publishing feel like the opposite of writing? How can a Black woman navigate interviews and writing conferences without being reduced to a symbol? Are writers located in their biographies or in their texts? And above all, how can the next book be written? Blurring the line between author and character and correspondence in literary criticism, Opacities delivers a personal, contemplative exploration of writing where it lives, among impassioned conversations in the work of beloved writers. This sounds like it's gonna be an interesting look into like more of the, I guess, back end operations of writing. I'm intrigued to hear about like the publishing world and what Sofia has to say about that, because I feel like that's not always explored in books about writing. So I think that's going to be a really interesting perspective to kind of throw in the mix. Next, we have Scaffolding by Lauren Elkin. This is coming out from FSG on September 17th, and I do have a copy of this on NetGalley, so I'm really looking forward to picking this up. I just read one of Lauren Elkin's nonfiction books, Art Monsters. I have a whole video talking about that entire thing, so I'm really curious to see what her fiction is like. The blurb says, a novel of Paris, desire, love, psychoanalysis, and the turbulent affairs of two couples across time. After a miscarriage and a breakdown, Anna, a psychoanalyst, finds herself unable to return to work, obsessing instead over a kitchen renovation and befriending a new neighbor, a younger woman called Clementine who has just moved into the building and is part of a radical feminist collective. 40 years earlier in the same apartment, Florence and Henry are renovating their kitchen. Florence is finishing her degree in psychology and attending feminist meetings in Jacques Lacan's infamous seminars. She is hoping to conceive their first child, though Henry isn't sure he's ready for fatherhood. Two couples in two separate but similar times, set against a backdrop of political disappointment and intellectual controversy, face the challenges of marriage, fidelity, and pregnancy. Lauren Elkin's Scaffolding is about the way our homes hold communal memories of all of their inhabitants and their stories, about the bonds we create and the difficulty of ever fully severing them, about the ways people we've loved live on in us. I think that the structure of these like two kind of parallel lives in different times but like the same place, I think that that's going to be interesting. I think that if her fiction writing is anything like her nonfiction writing, I'm gonna really enjoy this. I feel like from what I've seen from her, she has a really wide range of interests. I know she has a book called Flanneuse about like walking around cities, which I haven't read but am wanting to. yeah, I'm curious to kind of read her writing about Paris and see how she kind of evokes the setting in this. Next, we have Intermezzo by Sally Rooney. This is releasing on September 24th from FSG, which I feel like I didn't realize that FSG was publishing this, and I'm like auto-approved to view their books on NetGalley, so I think I'll be able to access this early, question mark, I hope. That would be very exciting. I don't think that Sally Rooney really needs any introduction in this corner of the internet. I've read all of her previous novels. I started with Normal People, then I read Beautiful World, Where Are You? And then Conversations with Friends. And I feel like I enjoyed each successive book even more than the last one. She's probably an author that I should like give a reread to, at least like one of her books at some point, because it has been quite a while since I've read her. Normal People was like one of the books that I read back in 2021 when I first got back into reading, and I feel like it kind of laid some of the foundations for my taste in books. So yeah, we all know and love Miss Sally. This book has my interest piqued because I feel like it's gonna be a little bit different from her previous novels. The blurb says, an exquisitely moving story about grief, love, and family, but especially love, from the global phenomenon Sally Rooney. Aside from the fact that they are brothers, Peter and Ivan Kubek seem to have little in common. Peter is a Dublin lawyer in his 30s, successful, competent, and apparently unassailable. But in the wake of their father's death, he's medicating himself to sleep and struggling to manage his relationships with two very different women. His enduring first love is Sylvia, and Naomi, a college student for whom life is one long joke. Ivan is a 22-year-old competitive chess player. He's always seen himself as socially awkward, a loner, the antithesis of his glib elder brother. Now, in the early weeks of his bereavement, Ivan meets Margaret, an older woman emerging from her own turbulent past, and their lives become rapidly and intensely intertwined. For two grieving brothers and the people they love, this is a new interlude, a period of desire, despair, and possibility, a chance to find out how much one life might hold inside itself without breaking. I'm really curious if this is in the first person to see how she does a male narrator, just because I feel like all of her previous books have been so female focused. It seems like this has a lot to do with relationships though, so I'm not worried about it. I think that the insights and the writing in here is gonna be wonderful as usual. Finally, another one that I am incredibly excited for is The Position of Spoons and Other Intimacies by Deborah Levy. This releases from FSG on October 1st. So yes, I have this on NetGalley. I'm putting it off a little bit just since it doesn't come out until October. I think I want to read one more of her other books before I pick this one up, but I'm itching to get to it. I saw Benjamin Journal talk about this in a recent video, and it seemed like he really enjoyed it. I think Nathan's Nook just read it as well and was posting some quotes to Goodreads, which had me excited. And then CJ from cjreads described this as if like Deborah Levy had a Twitter account. So I'm very sold on this. Deborah Levy is one of my favorite authors. The blurb for this says, a feast of observations about everything from the particular beauty of lemons on a table to the allure of Colette to the streets of Paris by the inimitable Deborah Levy. Deborah Levy's vital literary voice speaks about many things. On footwear, it has always been very clear to me that people who wear shoes without socks are destined to become my friends and lovers. On public parks, a civic garden square gentles the pace of the city that surrounds it, holding a thought before it scrambles. On Elizabeth Hardwick, she understands what is at stake in literature. On the conclusion of a marriage, it doesn't take an alien to tell us that when love dies, we have to find another way of being alive. Ooh. Levy shares with us her most tender thoughts as she traces and measures her life against the backdrop of different literary imaginations. Each page is a beautiful, questioning composition of the self. The position of spoons is full of wisdom and astonishments and brings us into intimate conversation with one of our most insightful, intellectually curious writers. I'm very curious about the form of this one. I was under the impression that it was like essays, but the genre on the publisher's website says bios and memoirs. For some reason with the way that the blurb is written, I feel like it's gonna be very fragmentary. I think also that like Twitter comparison is what is making me think that. So yeah, I'm curious to see how this is set up and just really excited to read another book by one of my favorite authors. So that is 15 books that are releasing in the second half of 2024. Let me know if you are looking forward to any of these as well. Let me know what I'm missing from this list. I'm sure that there are plenty of bangers coming out soon that I don't know about, so educate me and the people in the comments below, and we can all be excited about upcoming releases. That's gonna be it from me for today, so I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!